Language wars continue at the state capitol, with pregnant women being called birthing people, and more bizarro moments like efforts to protect dogs and birds from poisoning, while simultaneously advocating poison pills for people. Plus, Victoria gives us her take on the national election battle. Welcome to Speak Up Virginia, equipping you to speak up on the life, family, and freedom issues that matter most to you. From the Family Foundation, I'm your host, Candy Cushman, with our president, Victoria Cobb, and Dr. Todd Gaki, Vice President of Government Relations. Well, welcome everybody. Glad to have you back with us. We have some fascinating updates on what happened in the General Assembly. And there's a lot of controversial bills headed to the governor's desk that we want to talk to you about. And we have the guy that's been in the thick of it all, Dr. Todd Gaki, here today, that's going to give us an update. He's going to give us that insider view update on it. But before we get into that, I did want to bring on Victoria to just give her take on what's been happening on the national election scene, and also a quick update on the governor's latest vetoes. So welcome, Victoria. Glad to have you.
Yeah.
Again. It just, as far as the national elections go, it just keeps feeling like this weird version of Groundhog Day. Who would have thought we'd be back here with the exact same candidates, but that's what it is. And to me, it just feels like Groundhog Day, except even more intense. You know, one thing I thought that's interesting in all this and made me think of kind of Groundhog Day intensity is that I was seeing these polls out there that are showing that people on both sides of the aisle, it's almost like they're becoming more entrenched, like they feel even more passionately about these candidates, depending on what side of the aisle they're on. What do you think?
I mean, I guess it's possible. Yeah, I mean, in one sense, in the sense of they hate the other guy a lot, right? And maybe that has intensified. Biden's support, I don't think has intensified. So, if you look at these polls, typically, now each poll is slightly different, right? But typically, out of people who voted for Biden in 2020, he's actually looks like he's lost about 10, it varies slightly in numbers, but maybe about 10% of the people aren't convinced they're voting for him again. So that's interesting. Trump, on the other hand, the last one I saw was a Wall Street Journal one, and he had lost about 1% of the people who had supported him 4 years ago. So obviously there's a delta there that is problematic for Biden. But yeah, maybe the people who love Trump love him even more, and the people who really loved Biden the first time love him even more. But there's definitely people that have been lost, particularly on the Biden side, with incompetency, I think, honestly.
And what's more interesting about that is the issues from the exit polls that people were most concerned about. So you had a lot of these polls showing immigration as the top issue, economy under that. So I guess that makes it even harder for Biden, right?
Yeah, I do think that that's one of the interesting things is that, we're back with the same candidates 4 years later. And given the age of the candidates, I don't think we thought we would be back, honestly. I mean, I just think people thought there's no way both of them will be on our ballot box when we get to 2024. But nevertheless, the issue of immigration, which is now really coming out as the top issue in almost every poll in a pretty decisive way, is surprising. And I think that might be intensifying some of the support for Trump because, of course, he had a very strong stance on immigration, and Biden has been just letting people come into the country. And now he's backtracking a little bit, I guess, because it's becoming problematic.
Yeah.
But not enough, not fast enough. And I think Trump's still saying, look, I can build the wall tomorrow. I can, I think he's still saying the same things. I
definitely think Trump benefits from that.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's why you've got these left-wing pundits trying to downplay it. So I thought it was very entertaining when you had Rachel Maddow and Jen Psaki trying to laugh off the immigration issue, and they were actually mocking Virginians. If you guys didn't catch this is worth just showing a clip of this again.
I mean, I live in Virginia. Immigration was the number one issue. I mean, again, these could change in Virginia.
Well, Virginia does have a border with West Virginia. Very contested area.
Build the wall.
Yeah, this is pretty horrifying, honestly, that they're laughing at this. They can laugh all they want, but it's a pretty serious issue to a lot of people. And the idea that they're so removed from the average, from Virginia, and that they think that there's no impact of immigration in states unless you happen to be up against Mexico, and they make fun of us being with West Virginia, which I'm sure irritated West Virginians.
Psaki said she lives in Virginia.
I know.
She's mocking it.
I know. I think it tells you, there's a divide in this country, and it's a divide between the elites and the everyday. And that, to me, highlighted that divide, that she's just not even in the real world, because the real world says we've had actual crime in Virginia from illegals. We had a situation just a few weeks ago in Bedford where a 14-year-old girl was sexually assaulted by somebody who had come across the border and had been released into Virginia. And so this idea that they're only in certain places is no longer the case, and that their impact is somehow only felt in certain communities. No, I think every American now is aware that their community is being impacted by this, and we're certainly aware elections are being impacted by it and everything else.
Well, and it's so egregious just with the State of the Union as well. Instead of apologizing for getting the victim's name wrong, he's apologizing for saying the word illegal. I could not believe that.
I mean, it just tells you how much these elected officials, all the way up to the president, are just wed to their base. And I guarantee you, he got heat immediately after that you dared to use the word illegal, even though we all know that's the word. That is what this is. We just have gotten these nice words around it called undocumented. Mm-hmm. But no, they're violating a law.
Or what, newcomers now?
Newcomers. I mean, the idea that he would feel the need to go out and do that tells you how strong that part of the Democrat Party base is.
Yeah, and I have lots of friends that are immigrants.
Yeah. They came legally, though.
Yes.
This is the thing. People who come in, and they come in, the correct process, and they enhance our country, and these people are amazing. But the idea that is treated, it's just...
Or that you're apologizing for using the word instead of respect to the victim.
Yes, it actually respects those who have done. When you use the word illegal, it respects those who have done it the right way.
The right way,
and I think that's where they're unwilling to make the distinction, and they want it to act like this is one opinion being said. When you use the word illegal, they want to act like that's a racial term. No, it is not. It's talking about there's a right way and a wrong way,
yes.
and that law-abiding citizens need to know that we're following the right way, because when people cross the border illegally, that's their first act of something illegal. There is often, and we're finding this out, there are other illegal acts that harm people that follow.
Yes.
And we want the laws and justice to be across the board applied, and really just to know who's in the country, that we vetted them. I mean, we're hearing a lot more about China and other folks that are sending people across the border that may or may not be good actors.
Yeah. Well, one thing I also wanted to ask you about was I was disappointed that we didn't see more of the issues that Christians care about in kind of the top 3 things people were saying they were concerned about as they exited the polls. So, but you did have abortion coming up there as a top 3. So, you had immigration, economy. I was disappointed we didn't have things like parental rights, but you had abortion in there. And that's where I want to get your perspective on. Democrats are seeing, might have some trouble spots with the immigration issue and the economy. So how are they going to be using the abortion issue?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, issues get to the top of people's concern list when they really, really affect them, or when the media is driving a narrative, right? That's 2 paths to how issues become a top issue with a voter. One is something that's impacting them personally, which apparently immigration is getting to that point, because we know the mainstream media isn't highlighting this issue. They're not the ones putting forward, there's a real immigration problem, we need Biden to do something about it. That's not what we're seeing in the media. So that's obviously not it, but they are using abortion, and they are putting forward stories constantly about abortion, trying to raise that, because unfortunately what we do find, if you drill down on those polls, it's not actually the Christians that are saying pro-life is the most important issue. Unfortunately, a lot of times it is people who are pro-choice saying abortion access is the most important issue. Mm-hmm. So that's concerning, actually, when it gets to that top 3, if it's mostly people on the other side saying, this matters so much, I'm going to vote on candidates that are pro-choice. So, I'd love to see Christians really start prioritizing life really matters, and it's a top issue for me because of that perspective. Or that parental rights is still, that's been a hot topic here in Virginia, but it hasn't gone away. We still have battles. Like, it's not like that's been resolved. That was a big issue as Youngkin got elected.
Yeah.
But there's still so much progress to be made there.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense that if you're a Democrat strategist and you see your candidate doing really lousy on immigration and economy,
quick,
you've got to use the fear tactics.
Yep.
Or they think they have to. But like you say, I do wish that Christians were as passionate about protecting life as those on the other side of the aisle are about creating fear.
Yeah.
And from more of a selfish motivation.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the other thing I wanted to talk about, because you're bringing up the good point that people here in Virginia are still concerned about these issues, regardless of what they're saying at the national level. So bring us up to speed on this latest action that the governor took on vetoes, because we've got some good news and we've got some bad news. Why don't you give the bad news to us first?
Yeah, I'll start with a disappointing moment for the Youngkin administration. Governor Youngkin decided to sign a bill around same-sex marriage. So it put into our code for the first time, because although same-sex marriage is functionally what happens in Virginia, it happens not because we've made a law, but because of the Obergefell Supreme Court decision. And so this put it into our code for the first time, same-sex marriage, and he did sign it. And I think furthermore, it also said marriage is legal regardless of, and it had sex and gender as two different things on a list. We don't want to ever see in our code sex and gender treated as if you can be biologically one thing, but you can feel that you're another thing. That's concerning. So it's incredibly disappointing.
It's basically codifying transgender ideology.
I would argue anytime you put gender as different than sex in the code, you are opening the door. And, we know that bleeds out all the way down into issues around girls' sports. It's just a bad precedent to put it anywhere in the code for any reason.
Well, I did notice the governor's office put out the statement claiming that they were adding First Amendment protections through this. Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, there is in the bill this little line about, because it is in the section around clerks and what clerks do in their job with regards to marriage. And so there's a line about that religious clergy, which is not related to clerks. So this unrelated line to what it's actually supposed to be addressing, there's a line that basically says, clergy don't have to do same-sex marriage is essentially what it's saying. Mm-hmm. People that are religious. But the bottom line is we're concerned because, again, the First Amendment should be enough to give us religious freedom to not have to be put into situations where we're doing something that violates our faith. But when we write these very narrow religious liberty clauses, there's just big question marks about, well, who's not included and what does that mean for what's not called out?
If you have to spell out who is included,
then somebody's
clergy,
not.
What does that mean for people like bakers and photographers and other things that are not included in the whole system? Okay. So, all right. People really need to reach the governor on this. Tell us why the governor needs to hear from people on this and maybe how you would advise them going about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a time and a place to make sure that he knows that this didn't go unnoticed, right? So, part of what the left really likes, I mean, in some ways, this is also virtue signaling, right? They want the stamp of approval by the Commonwealth of same-sex marriage, and they're really, really happy that a Christian governor did it. And that's what the articles are about: is this is the guy that started his church in a church in his basement, right? Because what they really want is everybody's coming around. We're all going to this, we're all going to agree with this eventually. We just need to get all these people around. And so the governor does really need to hear how unhelpful that is to everything that we are trying to do in preserving family as God designed it. And so we are encouraging folks to just let him know that you're disappointed, because he has other bills that are in front of him that he still has to sign. I think specifically of a bullying bill where, again, we have gender and sex separated in this bad bill where instead of just saying we think it's wrong to bully anyone for any reason, we're sort of, putting so we really don't want this to go unnoticed. I mean, we love Governor Youngkin. He's done many wonderful things. I mean, we should talk about, one of the good things that he did during this veto session. I don't want this to sound like, he's done all terrible things, but this has to be noted. So on our website, we have the place where you can react to the governor's vetoes. And so I would just encourage people to go to our website, familyfoundation.org, click on the banner about governor vetoes, which really is about sort of all the bills and what he's done. And that'll give you a chance to kind of send your concern over this to the governor.
So do we want to talk about it all, why the governor did this, or is it better not to speculate what's in his mind?
All right, we should never assume motive, right? So we don't know the motivations. What we do know are that every elected official in the Republican Party have people around them, consultants, policymakers that are part of the mindset that this ship has sailed, that we need to get off this issue, that it is starting to fall, that marriage between a man and a woman is, it's passé, we're over it, and they need to just get on board and start towing that line. So the concern is just obviously what kind of advice is he getting, and this was entirely unnecessary because functionally, again, if you're a same-sex person in Virginia, you can get married. So this was an entirely unnecessary action for him to take.
Okay, good summary. Well, as Victoria mentioned, we do want to mention the good things that the governor did that we are very thankful for, super happy about, two major things that people cared about. among the Christian conservative world. Tell us about those two things. I was thinking what he did on the books and also surrogacy.
Yeah, so we've mentioned these bills on this show before, but first was the bill on the books. So basically, this was the idea that the left was trying to undermine the good work that Governor Youngkin had done in the past, where we had passed a law that said, look, parents, if there's going to be sexually explicit material in your curriculum, you need to know about it and you can opt your child out. Well, we also know there's been these battles in school boards locally about, what books are on the shelves in the library, all that stuff. So they put a bill forward to try to undermine, to basically say nothing that he did before, nothing in our law that was passed should be construed to permit censorship. And we've talked about this with broad definition. So we're thrilled the governor vetoed that bill and said, look, we're not going to undermine the good things that I've already done, which was what we were hoping he would do.
So good for the governor listening
good for the
to
governor.
parents on
yes,
that. Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay.
Very strong on that. And then also very strong on this surrogacy bill. I think we've also talked about this on the show, but the idea that we would commercialize the womb, that we would allow brokers into the state of Virginia to market, to exploit women who, who then would be drawn into this idea of becoming a surrogacy provider and being, it's just commercializing the pregnancy process is a horrific idea in every way. And so we are thrilled that Governor Youngkin said, no, we're not going to be a part of that. We're not starting that here in Virginia. We're not going to bring in marketing agencies and people that, make money off of these contracts. Yeah. I mean, we have surrogacy in Virginia, so we still have a lot of work to do to get back to where it's appropriate. But nevertheless, we don't need to take it a step further.
Yes. So we are thanking God for that action from the governor.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Victoria. Those are great updates. I really appreciate it. Well, as I mentioned, we have a special treat today. We have with us Dr. Todd Gaki, our Vice President of Government Relations. Basically, he oversees all of the lobbying and policy efforts happening down at the state capitol. So it's a real honor to have you today. Welcome, Todd.
Well, thank you, Candi. Thank you for having me. I'm a special treat. Wow. Some of the legislators of the General Assembly do not think of me in that way. But
why is that, Todd? You're always diplomatic and professional, right?
Yeah. Well, we also choose the most controversial bills and issues to speak on. So both sides are not always, looking forward to what I have to say when I get up there.
They don't know what they're missing out on.
There you go. Appreciate that.
I thought we'd start out today just talking about, with Democrats in control, it's a little interesting with the things that you have to sit through down there every day for hours, committee hearings and whatnot. And, just from what I get from you, a lot of times it kind of feels like you just sat through Bizarro world. So, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely feels like that. I think a lot of people think that we're out there on the golf course or having dinners. No, we're sitting in committees listening on hours of these bills, and you get to see and hear a lot of stuff. I find myself actually kind of observing the people in the audience too, and who gets up there and testifies on certain bills. That often brings some entertainment.
Yeah.
But the things that we're hearing this year, the left really is not kind of holding back.
I mean, I just heard you guys talking about, you actually spent time listening to debates about protecting elephants in Virginia, and I guess there's maybe one in the entire state of Virginia. So just stuff like that, right?
Yeah. We see bills like that, and then you can't declaw cats, and all of these. It really is the bills that they're bringing forward just have no real significance, and the more important things like school choice and protecting kids and their innocence. That seems to just fail in committee and not get the attention that it truly deserves.
Yeah, in the greater scheme of things, we love cats, but cats versus protecting kids, let's get our priorities straight.
Right. All about priorities, yes.
Well, in that vein, I thought it would be good to start out today with our inconceivable. Well, it's that time again. Time for our Inconceivable Moments Award. This is where we're featuring examples of the absolute lunacy and craziness that happens when cultural leaders try to give guidance completely apart from biblical principles. And we're calling this the Liberals' Most Inconceivable Moments Award.
Inconceivable!
So, Todd, I hear that you did have to sit through an entire committee hearing where they were talking about something good, how to help pregnant women, but there was this one little problem that they basically refused to use the actual term women, even though women is who would be impacted by this.
The bill, for most purposes, it's a decent bill. It's dealing with maternal health, making sure that we're studying and know how to provide good health care to women who are expecting. But you're right. Instead of using the term mother or women, they use the term birthing people. And we all know what that means. That means that men can have babies. in using that term.
Yeah, I'm looking at the term that was actually, or maybe is even still in the legislation, all birthing people in the Commonwealth.
Yeah. So apparently that includes me. I am a birthing person if I identify that way. It's remarkable. During the committee, we did try to have that language actually replaced with mother. We had an amendment, encouraged legislators to introduce that amendment, and it failed. The left resoundingly said no. They rejected the amendment. They want birthing people in there. That's how far this gender ideology has gone.
Yeah, let's just stop and think about that for a minute. It's supposed to be a bill that helps women. But, so it would otherwise be a good bill. But basically, I think it's like a Trojan horse. You have this agenda inserted in there where you're trying to force social change through language, which we've been seeing throughout this whole session.
Right.
Really.
And they're putting in place a term, birthing people, that's not defined anywhere in the code. And according to Senator Frivola, it's just based on information they've heard in committee that this is the, what did she say, the colloquial way of...
Well, she said just makes it more inclusive.
Yeah, it makes it more inclusive, yes. So really what they're doing is they're putting in there a term that pushes their agenda in a relatively good bill that does some okay things, that we can support.
Well, let's talk about why we should care about this. So, because some people might think, well, it's just a word, and if it helps people, just why even make an issue? But why does erasing the word women or woman or mother out of Virginia code, why is that, significant? Why should we care about that?
Well, I think from our standpoint, words matter. And what we're doing by saying birthing people instead of mothers, who are the ones who have babies, we're erasing womanhood. We're erasing what they bring to our society and to our families and to the good that they do. And it's just one thing after another where we're trying to erase womanhood. I mean, look at female sports. I mean, we're allowing biological males to take places on sports teams in place of females who work hard for those spots. I mean, we are really trying to diminish women.
And that's the thing, because these leftist Democrat leaders that are leading the General Assembly right now, they want to pose as we're all about protecting women.
Yeah.
But then you see erasing even the word women in the code, and then, opposing basic protections for females, whether it's locker rooms or sports.
Yeah.
So you have to challenge that this is not really the party for women at this point.
Yeah, and I think you raised a good point. It's time to start challenging their thinking, because at the end of the day, a man who thinks that he is a woman and can have a baby cannot. Plain and simple. You can sit in the garage all day long and say you're a car, but that does not make you a car. And so we have to start speaking truth. We speak it in love. But we have to start pushing back on this attack on language and this attack on what we've known as biological reality since we went through high school.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, there were some brave Republican senators that tried to at least get an amendment that would put the word woman back in there.
Yeah.
And one of those was Senator Mark Peake, a Republican from Lynchburg.
Mm-hmm.
And, he was trying to clarify that mothers, not men, give birth, as Todd has plainly stated. And as you mentioned, all the Democrats, they blocked that. They defeated it. But I just wanted to give our listeners a chance to hear that exchange, to hear Senator Peake trying to valiantly fight for that and what the response was. So let's just listen to that for a minute.
The testimony we heard was that the recent literature and information regarding the whole area of maternal and child health the nomenclature is now using birthing people. This is just more inclusive, but that was the conversation that we had.
Thank you, Senator Favola. Senator Peake.
Well, I mean, the only people who are having babies are women. So why don't we just put women in there, because they're the ones that we need to study, because you can't be any more inclusive than women, because they're the only ones having babies in the Commonwealth. It makes no sense that we would put in a phrase that does not exist and is not defined in code when we have the phrase women or mothers. So it seems like if we could amend like line 11 and put
Madam Chair.
outcomes for all women in the Commonwealth
Please
instead
use
of
the
all
cue.
birthing people. I would make that amendment that we strike birthing people and put in women.
Madam Chair. We have a cue here. Senator Peake, you are proposing an amendment. Before we vote on your proposed amendment, Senator Boysko is in queue, and then Senator Aird.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If our colleagues are not familiar that some people are not gender conforming, and there are women and people who identify as men who are able to have become pregnant, I think this is the current understanding in science and in health, and I would not encourage us to adopt this amendment.
So, Todd, I can't wait to hear what your response is to Senator Boysko's comment that this is really the understanding of science.
Yeah, and so she says the information that's out there, but she never once cites any of the leading articles, any peer-reviewed articles. All it is just puff pieces from the advocacy organizations that are feeding this information to them to drive this agenda. We know scientifically that biological women are the ones who have babies. Men cannot. And so the mere fact that she's even saying that this is a scientific, there's evidence of this, there's science behind this, or information, or whatever, is completely nonsense.
Now, she did, kind of insinuate or allude to the fact that we're talking about women that identify as men, getting pregnant, just to be totally fair to Senator Boysko. So they're putting that gender nonconforming thing, or,
right? She says gender nonconforming. So in other words, there could be a female who identifies as a male, and there could be a male who identifies as a female, and really, again, she's just alluding to this whole concept that someone can identify as the opposite sex. And I think we have to also admit there's some serious harm to this. There's individuals who are struggling with this, and they do need help. And we need to make sure we put in place ways that they can acquire that help to help them overcome these thoughts, these feelings, so that they can embrace their biological reality. In the same way, we want women to embrace their womanhood and embrace embrace the idea of bringing a child into this world and all that goes along with that.
Well, I think the overall irony here is that in their zeal to embrace transgenderism ideology, they end up erasing women, because the practical result of this whole thing is that you're taking women out of the state code and removing protections in the locker room. That's the practical result of this. So you can talk about all the terms and inclusive all you want, but you're actually becoming exclusive. So, that's kind of where it lands for me. Yeah,
the whole topic of transgenderism, you can just see how far it is pushing them on this issue, to the point where they cannot admit that women have babies.
All right. Well, speaking of other bizarro moments, we're just going to go right on to the next one here. There's also that moment when they were talking about protecting animals from poisoning, while at the very same time trying to legalize basically fatal poisoning of people. And in fact, at one point when that was happening, Victoria actually sent me a text of a screenshot of these two bills literally side by side on the docket. You have on top Senator Hashmi's bill for physician-assisted suicide, and then right under that, this bill about protecting animals from poisoning. I mean, how blind can you get sometimes?
I was actually really surprised that they put these two bills on that same docket together. A bill that would increase the penalties if you harm an animal, if you cause some type of harm to a companion animal. At the same time, we're talking about ending the life of someone who is terminally ill, but to treat their life in that way.
You're prescribing poison.
Yeah, you're prescribing chemical pills here to end their life, and it speaks to this whole notion that how we're valuing human life, and that animals and the treatment of those animals, whether it's bills that would stop you from declawing cats or mistreating these companion animals, they're elevated above the treatment of humans, whether it's in the womb or elderly or end of life. Yeah,
I think we got this a little upside down right now.
I think so. Yeah.
I mean, just to look at the language, it's interesting. So Senator Eben, I believe it was pushing his bill to make it a felony to, quote, administer poison or expose poison, as you said, to someone's companion animal. I guess that means a pet.
Yeah.
But then they also had a fowl. So then we all love birds.
Yeah.
But there's something deeper wrong here in our culture and with our priorities if we're really fighting to protect dogs and birds while also asking for the right to, like I was saying, basically prescribe a poison pill.
Yeah. And as Christians, we also, when we read the scriptures, we read how we treat God's creation with respect and dignity, but he created man first. And so we really need to make sure that we're elevating the dignity and the sanctity of life, and still treat animals, still treat his creation with respect. But we have to put priorities. We have to prioritize things here. And our General Assembly, unfortunately, is not right now.
Yeah, that is really well said, Todd. That we are here to be good stewards of animals. I mean, God has given us that mission to steward and love animals, but there's a sacredness to a human being that we're missing here. So I love the way you put that. But there's good news in all this. It looks like we've defeated physician-assisted suicide, at least for this year, right?
That's right, yeah. So the House bill did not make it over a crossover. They could not come up with enough votes in the House. So the Senate bill that passed came over to the House and just recently was carried over to 2025. That's a big win. That means that there's still legislators who are uncomfortable with the notion of ending someone's life prematurely, of taking someone away from their family and having those last moments with their family. And so it was a big win.
All right, Todd, I'm really glad that there is some good news and some hope in all the craziness we're talking about today. So that's good. Yeah. But on another sober note, I did want to highlight one final Bizarro moment. Okay. And this has to do with that. Unfortunately, I think we're going to have to admit that Virginia can be ranked worse than San Francisco because as crazy left as San Francisco has been getting lately, we actually might be worse. And let me tell you why. Because San Francisco city leaders at least have the decency to look at allowing murder charges for these low-life drug dealers that give our teens fentanyl-laced drugs that end up killing them. Yeah. We've heard these tragic stories, but apparently we couldn't do the same. We didn't have the same decency here in our General Assembly leadership, right?
Yeah, you're right. It is bizarro land when Virginia is worse than San Francisco when it comes to going after drug dealers. But there was a bill early in session that would have put in place more stricter penalties for drug dealers. So if someone dies of an overdose as a result of fentanyl or another drug, that these penalties would go after those drug dealers and hold them accountable. There was a lot of debate over this, but at the end of the day, the Democrat majority in the committee voted the bill down.
I mean, it's pretty much the same concept as what the San Francisco city leaders are doing. So what in the world is wrong with us? How many kids have to die? I'm sorry to be so frank, but I'm reading these horrific stories of parents that literally their kid goes up and watches television. They open the door, they're dead because of this. Why can't we agree on this? I
don't really know. They had a debate about, well, what if how far away do they have to be in order for them to be charged with murder? What if they're right there and then leave the scene, leaving the drugs and the child overdoses? I think there's also just this push against, this social justice movement, where they want to just kind of reduce the penalties for people who create some very heinous acts in our society, in our community. I don't know if the ACLU is behind this.
I saw that ACLU was opposing it.
Well, I don't understand why we cannot go after these drug dealers that are putting these known substances in the hands of our kids, and we're seeing many die. It's beyond the pale, really.
Yeah, you had at least the ACLU was at least kind of offering lesser options, and you had Senator Boysko again, bringing her up again. She was talking about the need to focus on more substance abuse treatment options. So I don't know if that kind of gets into some political correct thinking about it.
And I would agree with that. Let's get them the help they need, but it's not an either or. It's an and. We need to do this and that. We need to go after those that are creating havoc in our communities. And then let's give those who are struggling with drug addiction, let's give them the help they need.
But you need to be able to go after the people that are making profit from this off of young people dying. I mean, that's at a different level than just a kid in high school sharing something, or you're talking about dealers. But anyway, to make matters worse, we now also have legislation actually headed to the governor's desk that would allow for a pot shop on every corner. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, and we call it addiction for profit. Really, is what it is. It's the bill that would commercialize marijuana, and it would essentially allow for marijuana pot shops, in every locality. The bill it's bad, and so there was no effort to really allow localities to decide before these shops and the retail market comes in their localities. It gives them a way out through an opt-out, but at the end of the day, it's coming into their localities.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute, because I think that's interesting, because at least with the casinos, they had the ability to have a referendum or a vote on it before. Like, it can't come in their community unless they voted on it. So that's how you saw it being defeated in Richmond, and how you see people in Nova area being able to have pushback. They're not going to have that if this bill were to pass.
No.
It would come to their community unless they made special action to stop it.
Right, unless they went with a referendum that says that prohibits them from coming in. We wanted more of a direct that you can't come in at all unless we give you permission.
Yeah.
That would be a more appropriate approach to this. Yeah. We're also, when you look at the bill, it's adult use marijuana as well.
That's how they try to justify it.
That's how they justify it. If you're 21 and older, that's only who's going to be getting this.
Which we all know is not the case.
We know it's not the case because all you're going to do is make younger teenage kids even more curious, and you desensitize them to that. You have adults in the General Assembly that are saying that it's okay, essentially, to smoke marijuana, knowing all the harms, the psychosis. We have drunk or driving while under the influence. All of these things that can happen as a result of marijuana use, and the adults in the General Assembly are passing this legislation, and it's very frustrating and disappointing.
I mean, the data has clearly showed us that what you're saying is true, that kids, when you have more frequent accessibility to marijuana, all of those things increase. The pathologies, the psychotic episodes, all of that is shown with data to increase. So there's no doubt.
Yeah, just to be clear, 21 is just a number, because if we look at Colorado and some of these other states, the youth uses of marijuana actually increase in those states, because you're saying that if it's okay for 21, well, then it must be okay. So they begin then to experiment with the substance.
That's the other thing. All we have to do is look at what's already happening in the other states, which show us clear warnings. In Colorado, kids going more to the poison centers. As we mentioned before, we had the 4-year-old that died here in Virginia from THC-laced gummy bears. It's just sad, but it is going to the governor. We're going to talk in a minute about what people can do about. Well, let me go ahead and ask you. So if it is going to be at the governor's desk, or maybe even already is,
it's headed that way.
Okay, what can people do about that?
Yeah, well, we have on our website a governor's veto page that they can go to, and then we're going to start adding bills that have been passed by the General Assembly that will be headed to the governor for his action. He can either amend a bill, he can sign the bill into law, or he can veto the bill. And so what we're going to have is an action for you to be able to directly contact the governor and say, veto this legislation. This is going to create tremendous harms to our families, to our kids, create more addiction. And so please don't sign this bill, veto it. I would also encourage you to maybe, call the governor's office, and express very politely express your opposition to this bill. But we're going to have that page up, and it's available now for some bills, but we're going to keep adding more to that list.
And I think it is important that he does hear your voice on this. He's made clear he's not a fan of this, but there were several Republicans that crossed the line on this and supported this. And so I think it helps the governor if he's hearing from a lot of you that, no, this does not reflect what we want. So please do that. I did want to ask you real quick about a bill that I know a lot of our audience cares about, and that's this parental notification when drug overdoses happen on campus. Tell us real quick where that's at.
So there were two versions. The one that came out of the House was a little bit different than the one that came out of the Senate. The Senate had the stronger language, the 24-hour period, notification period. They had to list the drugs that were used or found on the premises at the school. That had to be included in the notification to the parents, whereas the House version was just essentially giving the Department of Education an authority, which they already have, to create model policies for local school boards on how to notify parents and address overdoses on school premises. The bill that is going to the governor is the House version, which is not the stronger language. And so what we're encouraging the governor to do, and we would hope that you would encourage him as well, is to adopt the stronger Senate language, amend it to include that language in there that actually puts in code what school boards, what school divisions have to tell parents when there is drug overdoses taking place on school premises. Parents should know.
Yeah, so they can warn their kids about these things like fentanyl being passed around, and so they can have the conversations when their child sees something traumatic. So it's common sense that they should have prompt notification. So let's just kind of wrap up with where we're at in session, and how people can stay in the loop on how they can take action on these things. So as we mentioned earlier, even though session has technically ended, there's still work to be done. They're still working out things on the budget. So that's still going on. There was some deadlines that went by on vetoes for the governor, but now he's got another deadline, as I understand it, on April 17th, right? For vetoes,
that's right. Yeah.
Where he can veto, just let things pass without a signature, or amend. So he's kind of got three choices there.
Yeah. So there will be a number of bills that are be headed to his desk that he has to take action on. And those bills will be, once he takes action, the General Assembly comes back on April 17th to consider what his actions are. Now, if he signs it into law, then they don't have to do anything, obviously. But if he amends it or vetoes it, the General Assembly comes back and will vote on whether or not to accept or reject his amendments or his veto. And so we have some time now with a lot of legislation that's going to be before him. He has his work cut out for him.
Yeah.
And we will, again, keep posting those bills on our website of him being able to, encouraging him to take action and veto a lot of these bad bills that that threaten the sanctity of life and parental rights and religious liberty. So that's the next phase. And we said kind of at the beginning of the session that there wasn't a lot that we were able to accomplish because of the composition, because of the leadership. And we knew that a lot of our work was going to be on the back end. Well, this is it.
We're here at the back end.
We're at the back end. This is where a lot of the work is going to take place.
All right. So takeaway is now is the time to start reaching out to the governor and communicating about what you would like him to veto, or like the parental notification for drug overdose bill to strengthen. And to make it easy for you, we do have that veto webpage. So just go to familyfoundation.org and you will see a big banner, Governor Veto page, and click on that for all the latest information. And make sure that you are signed up for our alerts, familyfoundation.org/alerts, because you will get an email from Todd that says we need you to reach out to the governor. So you don't want to miss out on that. And so I just want to encourage everybody, thank you so much, because your voice does make a difference. And also I want to thank you, Todd, for the hours you've been putting in and the great work. I mean, Todd has put in a lot of work analyzing what kind of changes can be put before the governor on different bills. And he's tracking all this. So thank you for the hours you and your team are putting in.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you, everybody, for joining us for Speak Up Virginia. Remember to share the playlist. If you find this, educational and something you think other people should know about and hear so that their voice is represented, make sure you share it either through the YouTube playlist or with the audio only Spotify, Apple. That helps us get the word out and empower more people. Remember, we are stronger when we speak together. See you next time.